The Zogran Empire was known across many star systems for its power, its order, and its grand palace that floated above the capital city like a shining crown. But on this quiet morning, the palace was filled with worry. It was not a threat from another world, not a rebellion, and not a crisis of war. It was something far more personal. The Emperor's young twins, Lyra and Kelrin, had stopped eating. The Emperor, a tall and calm ruler named Varric, stood with his hands behind his back in the royal nursery. He watched his children from a short distance, trying not to show his fear. Lyra sat on the floor with her soft blue blanket, her large silver eyes staring down. Kelrin sat beside her, holding a small wooden toy shaped like a starship. Neither child touched the food placed next to them. They had not touched food for days. Attendants rushed in and out of the nursery, whispering in nervous voices. Alien physicians, some with glowing eyes and others with long fingers made for delicate work, gathered around their scanners and tools. Every expert from every region of the empire had tried to solve the problem, but no one understood why the twins refused to eat. The Emperor listened as one physician cleared his throat and stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we have checked their health many times. Their bodies are fine. Their minds are fine. But they still will not eat." Another physician, older and with bright green skin, sighed deeply. "We have tried every method known to our species and our allies. Calming light, aromatherapy, nutrient waves, feeding drones. Nothing helps." Varric's expression remained steady, but inside his heart was tight. The twins were only 4 years old, and they were the future of the empire. If they became weak or sick, the entire empire would panic. He knew that many planets watched closely, waiting for any sign of weakness. But right now, Varric was not thinking as an emperor. He was thinking as a father. Lyra lifted her blanket and hid her face under it. Kelrin placed his toy starship on the ground and pushed it gently back and forth, but the movement was slow and tired. Both children had once been full of energy, running through the palace halls, laughing at every silly sound. Now they only sat quietly, refusing every bite offered to them. Varric stepped closer and knelt down beside them. "My little stars," he said softly. "Why will you not eat?" Neither child answered. For the first time in many cycles, Varric felt helpless. He had led armies, negotiated peace, and carried the weight of millions on his shoulders. But he could not convince his own children to take even one bite. Behind him, the attendants waited anxiously for instructions. The chief advisor finally spoke. "Your Majesty, if this continues, the twins will grow weaker. We must find a new solution, perhaps something outside our traditions." Varric turned his head slightly. "Outside our traditions? What do you mean?" "We have called every healer within the empire," the advisor said. "But there is one group we have not called yet." He paused. "Humans." Several attendants gasped. Some looked offended. Others looked confused. "Humans?" Varric repeated. "Yes, Your Majesty. Humans raise their young in unusual ways. Their methods are strange, but many reports say they work well with children. Their parenting style is emotional, playful, even chaotic, but effective." Varric stood up slowly. Humans were known for many things: creativity, stubbornness, endless curiosity. They were not known for refinement, elegance, or order, but they did care deeply for children. Even the Emperor knew that. "You are suggesting," Varric said, "that we bring a human parent into the imperial palace?" "Yes, Your Majesty. A human who has raised children. Someone with real experience." The room fell silent as Varric considered the idea. It sounded absurd. The empire was ancient and vast. Humans were relatively new to the interstellar stage. And yet, perhaps that was exactly why their methods might work. They were not bound by old rules. They were unpredictable, hopeful, and sometimes foolish. But their foolishness often carried surprising wisdom. Varric looked at the twins again. Lyra peeked out from her blanket. Kelrin leaned against his sister, tired and hungry but unwilling to eat. Something had to change. Something new had to be tried. "Very well," the Emperor said quietly. Send a request to the Human Federation. Find a human father who has raised children. Bring him here. The attendants bowed and hurried out to deliver the order. The physicians exchanged unsure looks but said nothing. Varric stayed in the nursery a little longer, watching his children and wishing he could understand what troubled them. He did not know it yet, but this decision would change more than the twins' appetite. It would change the Empire itself. And somewhere far across the stars, an ordinary human father would soon receive a call he never expected. A call that would bring him into the heart of an alien empire and into the lives of two children who needed him more than anyone ever had. The message that would change Jason's life arrived on a quiet evening. He had just finished cleaning the small kitchen of his apartment, and his young daughter's drawings were still scattered across the table. Even though his daughter was grown now and lived on her own, he kept the old drawings on display. They reminded him of the days when feeding a child meant trying everything from silly sounds to funny faces. He missed those days more than he liked to admit. As he sat down with a cup of warm tea, a bright light flashed outside his window. A small drone dropped gently to the ground, its metallic wings folding inward. Jason blinked in surprise. The drone projected a symbol he recognized from news broadcasts, the Zogran Empire's official crest. He opened his door carefully. The drone activated a calm voice. "Greetings, Jason. The Zogran Empire requests your assistance. Your presence is needed for a matter of great importance involving young children. Please accept the summons. Transport will arrive in 1 hour." Jason stared at it. Children? The Empire needs me? Did they get the wrong person? But the drone continued blinking patiently, as if it expected no refusal. Jason rubbed the back of his neck. He had never traveled outside his planet, let alone across star systems. He was an ordinary man, a single father who had raised a daughter with love, patience, and the occasional bedtime bribe. Nothing about him seemed important enough for aliens to call upon. Still, the message was clear, and curiosity tugged at him. If children were involved, maybe he could help. He had once been good at calming a frustrated toddler, fixing a bad mood with a joke, or convincing a picky eater to try at least one bite. "All right," he whispered to himself. "I guess I have an hour to pack." He grabbed a small bag and filled it with comfortable clothes, a photo of his daughter, and a few simple things he thought children might like: colored pencils, stickers, and a small plastic airplane toy that had always made his daughter laugh. When the hour passed, a transport ship descended from the clouds, humming softly. The side door slid open, revealing two Zogran envoys with tall frames, smooth gray skin, and calm, glowing eyes. "Jason of Earth?" one asked. Yeah, that's me. We thank you for answering the summons. Please step aboard. The Emperor awaits your help." Jason swallowed hard and stepped inside. The door closed behind him, and the transport lifted into the sky. As they traveled through space, Jason watched planets and stars pass by faster than he could fully process. He sat quietly, feeling small but strangely steady. If children needed him, then he would try his best. He had always believed that kindness and patience had power, even in difficult situations. When the transport finally arrived at the Zogran capital world, Jason followed the envoys through tall silver halls that sparkled under soft light. Everything in the palace felt grand, peaceful, and very unfamiliar. They brought him to a wide chamber where Emperor Varric stood waiting. The Emperor was taller than Jason expected, with calm eyes and long, flowing robes that shimmered like starlight. Jason bowed awkwardly. Hello, Your Majesty. I hope I'm not in trouble." To his relief, Varric smiled gently. "You are not in trouble, Jason of Earth. You are here to help my children. I ask you this with great respect. Will you try?" Jason straightened. "I can try. I'm not sure why I was chosen, but I'll do my best." The Emperor nodded and motioned for him to follow. As they walked, Varric explained the situation in a soft voice. "My twins, Lyra and Kelrin, have stopped eating. None of our physicians can understand it. They have become quiet, withdrawn, and fearful. We believe they are overwhelmed by palace life, expectations, and constant attention. Jason listened closely. That made sense. Children sometimes shut down when everything felt too big or too serious. I've dealt with picky eaters before, Jason said gently. Sometimes kids just need to feel safe. Or they need something familiar. Or they need something fun. Fun? Varric repeated, as if the word were foreign. Yes, fun helps a lot. Kids open up when they're relaxed. Varric looked at him with thoughtful eyes. Our methods are structured, formal, respectful, perhaps too rigid for young hearts. Jason gave him a small smile. Kids break rules in their own way. Sometimes you have to meet them where they are. They reached the nursery doors. 2 guards stepped aside. Jason took a slow breath. The Emperor opened the door. Inside, Lyra sat on her blanket again, holding the edge tightly. Kelrin sat beside her with his toy starship, pushing it slowly across the floor. Neither looked up. Jason stepped in carefully. He did not want to scare them. He knelt down far from them and placed the small plastic airplane toy gently on the floor. "Hi," he said softly. "My name is Jason. I'm here to hang out with you for a little while. You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. I'll just sit here for now." Lyra peeked at him from under her blanket. Kelrin stared at the small airplane toy with cautious curiosity. The Emperor watched silently from the doorway. Jason smiled gently. He knew this moment well, the first step, the first slow connection. And he could feel it already. The twins were scared, but not closed. They were waiting for someone who didn't command them, pressure them, or expect perfection. Someone who would simply be kind. It was only the beginning, but Jason felt a small spark of hope. He did not know what would happen next, but he was ready to try. And maybe, just maybe, this strange journey across the stars had brought him exactly where he was needed. Jason stayed sitting on the nursery floor, giving the twins plenty of space. He knew that rushing a child never worked. Children opened up slowly, like flowers in the morning sun, and he had learned long ago that patience was the most powerful tool a parent could have. Lyra peeked at him again. Kelrin's silver eyes stayed focused on the small plastic airplane toy lying between them. The toy was bright blue with round edges and soft wings. Nothing about it was threatening, and it somehow looked friendly even on the polished palace floor. Jason gently nudged the airplane a little closer to them with one finger. Not too close. Just enough for them to see he was offering it. "This little guy helped my daughter when she didn't want to eat," Jason said softly. "I used to make it fly across the table. She would laugh so hard she forgot she was being stubborn." Kelrin blinked slowly. Lyra lowered the edge of her blanket just enough to see better. Jason smiled. "It goes like this. Whoosh." He made a very soft flying sound. Not loud, not silly, just gentle. He lifted the airplane an inch off the floor and moved it in a small circle. Lyra's blanket slipped down a little more. Kelrin leaned forward, curiosity starting to push aside his fear. Jason put the airplane back down. "You don't have to touch it. You can just look for now. I'll leave it right there." The twins didn't move, but their eyes stayed on the toy. The Emperor, watching from the doorway, whispered to his advisor, "He is doing nothing. Your Majesty," the advisor whispered back. "To human children, this is something." The Emperor frowned but stayed quiet. He had agreed to trust Jason, at least for now. Jason gently shifted his weight, making sure he looked relaxed. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes new places feel too big, too bright, too many people watching you. When my daughter was little, she didn't like big crowds either. She would hide behind me and refuse to talk or eat." Lyra's fingers clutched her blanket. Kelrin's toy starship stopped moving. "But she felt better," Jason continued, "when someone sat with her quietly. No pressure, no rushing, just being there." He rested his hands on his knees. "So that's what I'm doing. I'm here. That's all." For a long moment, the nursery stayed silent except for the faint hum of the palace systems. The twins' eyes slowly softened. The fear in them did not disappear, but it loosened its grip just enough for curiosity to slip in. Finally, Kelrin spoke first, barely a whisper. "Why are you here?" Jason met his gaze with warm kindness. Your dad asked me to come. He thought maybe I could help you feel better. Lyra lowered her blanket to her lap. We don't want to eat. I know, Jason said gently. And that's okay. You don't have to eat right now. I just want to understand how you feel. Kelrin hugged his knees. Everyone watches us. All day. All the time. They want us to behave. They want us to be royal. Lyra nodded. And everyone gets so scared when we don't do something right. It makes us scared too. Jason's heart softened. It made perfect sense. They were children trapped inside a world of pressure. He spoke softly. You know, where I come from, kids don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be royal either. They can make mistakes, play games, make messes, and nobody panics. Lyra blinked. Really? Really? Jason said with a gentle smile. And when dinner time comes, sometimes kids don't want to eat because the day felt too big, or too hard, or too serious. But when something fun happens, their stomachs relax. Their hearts relax too. Kelrin's eyes moved toward the airplane toy again. Fun? Like the flying toy? Yeah, Jason said softly. Fun like that. Lyra tilted her head. Can you make it fly again? Jason picked up the airplane slowly, making sure the twins could see every movement so they wouldn't feel overwhelmed. Only if you want me to. Both twins nodded. He lifted the airplane a little higher this time and made it glide gently through the air. This is how it flew across my kitchen table. Sometimes it landed in the wrong place. Sometimes it bumped into my daughter's cup and made a big mess. She thought it was hilarious. He chuckled softly. Lyra giggled, just a tiny sound, but real. The Emperor straightened at the doorway, surprised. Jason lowered the airplane and set it on the ground again. You can touch it if you want. Or not. It's okay either way. Kelrin stretched out one hand slowly, very slowly, and tapped the wing with one finger. He pulled back quickly, then touched it again with a little more courage. Lyra reached forward too, running her fingers along the toy body. It feels soft. It's made for kids, Jason said gently. Safe edges. Easy to hold. Nothing scary. The twins glanced at each other, then looked at him. Lyra spoke first. You're not like the palace people. I'm just a dad, Jason said. I don't wear fancy clothes. I don't give orders. I just try to help. Kelrin hesitated, then asked quietly, Will you come back? Jason nodded without hesitation. Yes, I'll come back. I'm here to help for as long as you need me. Lyra's shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. Kelrin hugged the little airplane to his chest. Outside the room, the Emperor watched with wide, stunned eyes. He had seen something none of his physicians or advisors had been able to achieve. His children were opening up, and the human father had done it simply by being gentle, patient, and kind. It was only the beginning, but something important had shifted. Jason had gained the twins' trust, and trust was the first step toward healing. The next morning, the palace halls were already buzzing with tension before the suns had even risen. Attendants moved quickly, whispering to one another about the strange human father who had arrived. Some were curious, some doubtful, and some quietly worried that allowing such informality near the royal heirs would bring chaos. Jason, however, walked calmly beside the Emperor through the long corridor leading back to the nursery. He carried nothing but the small plastic airplane and a simple cloth bag filled with a few things he thought the twins might enjoy. Crayons, stickers, a tiny rubber ball. He had no idea if any of these things would interest alien children, but he hoped so. As they walked, the Emperor spoke in a low voice. My staff informed me that the twins interacted with you more than they have interacted with anyone else in weeks. This is unusual. Jason nodded. Kids open up when they feel safe. They talked because they weren't scared of me. That's all. And you believe this feeling of safety comes from your lack of formality? The Emperor asked. Jason shrugged. Formality is good for ceremonies, not for kids. Kids need softness. They need someone who sees them as children, not symbols. The Emperor thought about that for a moment. His long robes brushed softly against the polished floor. I have always tried to teach them responsibility early. The Empire expects much of them. Perhaps too much. Jason gave him a gentle look. They're still little. There's plenty of time for responsibility. Right now, they need warmth. When they reached the nursery, the guards stepped aside again. Lyra and Kelrin were already awake, sitting on the floor with their toys scattered around them. When they saw Jason walk in, both twins sat up straighter. "He came back," Lyra whispered. "I told you he would," Kelrin whispered back. Jason gave them a warm smile. "Morning, you two." He sat on the floor, choosing a spot that wasn't too close but still friendly. Lyra crawled a little closer to him without saying anything. Kelrin held the airplane toy carefully in his hands. Jason reached into his cloth bag and pulled out a small rubber ball. "This bounces," he said softly. He pressed it on the floor and let it bounce once. Not too high, just a tiny hop. Kelrin's eyes widened. Lyra leaned forward. "Do it again." Jason bounced it again and let it roll toward them. Lyra caught it with both hands and giggled softly. Kelrin reached over to touch it, examining its smooth surface. "It's simple," Jason said. "But sometimes simple things make kids feel comfortable." The Emperor watched from the doorway again. His advisor whispered beside him, "Your Majesty, the humans' actions seem to create disorder. The twins are not sitting properly or following palace rules." "They are happy," the Emperor replied quietly. "That may be more important for now." But as Jason continued playing gently with the twins, the cultural differences became more obvious. The attendants stiffened whenever Lyra laughed too loudly or when Kelrin rolled the ball across the floor. Zogran children were expected to behave calmly, speak softly, and sit in composed positions. Nothing about the twins' play fit those rules. One attendant finally spoke up. "Sir Jason, they should not sit on the floor like this. Royal children must remain dignified at all times." Jason looked at her with a polite smile. "Kids don't learn dignity by being scared of breaking rules. They learn it by feeling loved and supported. We can teach manners later. Right now, they need to relax." The attendant's face tightened. She clearly disagreed but said nothing. Then another moment came that startled many in the room. Lyra reached out and gently took Jason's hand. To the Zogran attendants, this was unusual. Royal heirs never initiated touch with non-family members. Lyra whispered, "Jason, will you tell us a story?" Jason smiled. "Sure. Do you want a story from Earth?" Kelrin nodded eagerly. "Yes, something small. Not too scary." So Jason told them a simple story about a little bird who was afraid to fly until it learned that trying was more important than being perfect. The twins listened closely, their eyes soft and peaceful. When the story ended, Lyra leaned her shoulder gently against Jason's arm. Kelrin rested the airplane in his lap, looking comfortable for the first time that morning. But the attendants were in complete shock. One whispered urgently, "Your Majesty, this breaks protocol in at least 7 ways. The children are treating him like a caretaker." The Emperor's expression grew thoughtful. Perhaps that is what they need. As the morning went on, the misunderstandings grew clearer. At one point, Jason tried to show the twins how to draw simple shapes with crayons. He placed a sheet of paper on the floor and drew a circle. Several attendants gasped. "The royal heirs cannot draw on the floor. This is improper. They must use the designated creative platform." Jason blinked. "The what?" An attendant pointed to a complicated metal device in the corner. It looked more like a scientific scanner than something a child should draw on. Jason shook his head with a gentle smile. "This is fine. The floor works just as well." Lyra nodded enthusiastically. Kelrin grabbed a crayon and drew a crooked line. The Emperor quietly observed all of this. Some part of him wanted to stop the chaos. Another part of him saw something different. His children were laughing. They were relaxed. They were opening up. And all of this was happening because of a human father who didn't follow palace rules. As the session ended, the Emperor approached Jason. "Your methods are strange," he admitted softly. Jason chuckled. "Yeah, humans are strange. But it works." "I see that it does," the Emperor said. watching his children with a softer gaze. Perhaps the Empire has forgotten something simple. Perhaps we have forgotten how to let children be children. Jason nodded gently. Every child needs room to grow. And sometimes, a little fun. It was clear now that the cultural gap between Zogran formality and human warmth had created misunderstandings. But something else was becoming clear, too. These misunderstandings were opening the Emperor's eyes. He was beginning to see that Jason's way, simple, human, and full of heart, might be exactly what his children needed. The Emperor woke early the next morning. He had not slept well. Every time he closed his eyes, he kept seeing the moment when the human dad had made the two small princes open their mouths with nothing more than a silly little airplane game. Felt unbelievable. Felt impossible. Felt like something out of a strange dream. But it was also real. The Emperor walked to the balcony that overlooked the gardens. The morning light was soft, and the cool air brushed against his face. He placed both hands on the stone railing and sighed deeply. He had ruled a vast empire for many years, yet there were still things he did not understand, like how a simple human could succeed where the greatest royal caretakers had failed. Far below, in the private courtyard, Dylan was already awake. A guard had escorted him there so he could get fresh air while the palace prepared breakfast. He sat on a bench and tied his shoes. He did not look nervous, even though the place was full of towering palace guards and stern-faced advisors. One of the ministers approached the Emperor carefully. "Your Majesty," the minister said, "the royal twins have requested breakfast. They are asking for the human. They will not sit down unless he is present." The Emperor straightened slowly. "Again?" he whispered. "Yes, Your Majesty. The royal caregivers are waiting." But the twins refused to begin anything without him. The Emperor closed his eyes for a moment. This situation was becoming strange. The Empire had rules, traditions, and strict structures for everything. And now, two small princes, who had refused food for days, were suddenly ready to eat, but only with the help of a human dad who made flying noises with a spoon. He turned to the minister. "Bring him to the breakfast hall, and prepare the same setup as yesterday. No mistakes." Down in the courtyard, a guard approached Dylan. "Sir Dylan," the guard said politely, "the Emperor requests your presence in the breakfast hall. The princes are waiting for you." Dylan let out a soft breath. "All right," he said. "Let's go help the little guys." As they walked through the long corridors, palace workers moved quickly, clearing the area, whispering to each other as he passed. Some bowed, some stared, some whispered things like, "That's him, the one who made the princes eat." Dylan felt awkward, but he kept walking. When he entered the breakfast hall, he immediately saw the twins. They were seated on their tall chairs, their tiny legs swinging. Their plates were full of healthy food, but they did not touch anything. Instead, they grinned when they saw him. "He is here," one twin said excitedly. "Now we can eat," the other twin added. Dylan walked over and gave them a friendly smile. "Hey buddies, ready for breakfast?" The twins nodded quickly. He sat down beside them, picked up a spoon and said in a cheerful voice, "All right, here comes the airplane." He made a soft flying sound and moved the spoon toward the first twin. The little prince opened his mouth wide. One of the royal caregivers gasped quietly. The Emperor, who was watching from his seat, tried not to show his shock. It still looked unreal. Dylan moved to the second twin. "Your turn, co-pilot. Open wide." The spoon flew again, and the second prince opened his mouth without hesitation. Within minutes, the twins were eating happily, giggling between bites. The hall was silent except for the soft clinks of plates and the excited voices of the children. Several ministers leaned toward each other. "How does he do that? Is it magic? No. It must be some human technique." The Emperor watched with mixed feelings. There was relief because his children were finally eating again. There was also curiosity, and, quietly, a little confusion. A simple human father had done something that the Empire could not. After the twins finished their meal, Dylan gently wiped their mouths with a napkin. "Good job, both of you," he said. The twins beamed. "You will come again tomorrow?" one of them asked. "Yeah," Dylan replied softly. "If your dad wants me to." Both princes turned to the Emperor with hopeful faces. The Emperor cleared his throat. "Yes, we will discuss it," he said, trying to sound calm. But inside, he already knew the answer. He needed this human. And maybe the Empire needed him too. The morning sun was warm and gentle over the palace grounds. Dylan walked across the courtyard with 2 guards guiding him, though he no longer felt nervous around them. He had been in the royal palace for several days now, and each day felt stranger than the one before. He was still a human far from home, but the place no longer felt completely unfamiliar. It felt almost normal in a strange way. The 2 young princes were waiting in the playroom that morning. The Emperor had agreed that before breakfast, the boys should have a little time to relax, and they had demanded Dylan join them. The playroom was huge, filled with floating toys, soft mats, and gentle light that shifted colors. When Dylan entered, both twins shouted with excitement. "Dylan! Dylan! You came!" one twin said. "We waited," the other added. Dylan smiled. "Good morning, you two. Ready to play?" They nodded quickly. One handed him a small toy ship, shaped like a sleek star cruiser. The other grabbed a soft bouncing orb. Soon, they were running around the room, laughing loudly. Dylan flew the toy ship in circles, making soft whooshing sounds. The twins chased him, trying to catch the ship. Every time they got close, he would pull it up just in time, pretending it escaped. One of the royal attendants stood in the corner, watching with disbelief. "Amazing," she whispered to another attendant. "They were so quiet and serious before. Now look at them." The other attendant nodded. At that moment, the Emperor stepped into the room. He had come quietly, so no one noticed him at first. He watched Dylan for a long moment. Dylan looked relaxed and happy. The twins looked joyful, completely different from the restless and upset boys they had been before. The Emperor crossed his arms slowly. "How does this human do it?" he muttered under his breath. A senior advisor nearby cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, it seems he simply knows how to handle children. Perhaps it is his nature. He is a father, after all." The Emperor did not reply. Instead, he continued to watch. Finally, Dylan noticed the Emperor and gave a small, respectful nod. "Morning, Your Majesty. Just keeping them busy before breakfast." He gently guided the toy ship into the hands of one of the boys. The Emperor stepped forward. "They seem energetic today." Dylan chuckled. "Kids are kids. Even Emperor's kids." The Emperor blinked slowly at the unexpected humor but did not seem offended. The twins rushed toward him a moment later. "Father," one said. "We played with Dylan," the other added. "I can see that," the Emperor replied softly. The twins grabbed Dylan's hands. "Breakfast now? With airplane?" they asked eagerly. Dylan nodded. "Of course. Let's eat." The group moved toward the breakfast hall. The Emperor walked beside Dylan, something he never did with anyone outside the highest-ranking officials. "Human," the Emperor began quietly. "May I ask you something?" Dylan looked at him. "Sure. Go ahead. Why do you do this? Why help my children so freely? You do not owe me anything." The Emperor's voice was calm but heavy. Dylan thought for a moment. "Because they're kids," he said simply. "They needed help. And I know what it feels like when a kid won't eat or when they're sad. I'm a dad. It's natural to help." The Emperor stared ahead in silence. Dylan added, "I'm not doing it for power or rewards, if that's what you're worried about. I'm just doing what any decent father would do." When they reached the breakfast hall, the twins climbed into their seats happily. The Emperor took his position at the head of the table. Dylan picked up a spoon and began the familiar routine. "Here comes the airplane," he said cheerfully. The twins opened their mouths wide and giggled. One of the ministers whispered, "Incredible. It works every time." Once the twins were eating, the Emperor leaned forward slightly, studying Dylan with a thoughtful expression. After a quiet moment, he spoke. "Human Dylan, I believe the Empire owes you a great debt. And perhaps We may need your help with more than just feeding. That afternoon, the palace felt calmer than usual. Dylan had learned that structure was important to the Zogran people, but laughter and lightness could exist alongside it. The twins had spent the morning playing, drawing, and eating happily, and now they were quietly resting in the playroom while Dylan prepared a small activity he thought might encourage them further. He laid out several small building blocks, shaped like little starships and planets. They were simple and colorful. The twins watched him curiously as he carefully built a small tower. "See this?" he said softly. "We can make it go really high, but we have to be gentle so it doesn't fall. You want to help me?" Lyra crawled closer first, her fingers hovering over the blocks. Kelrin followed, clutching his little airplane toy. Dylan let them add pieces, making soft, encouraging sounds as they worked. Whenever a block wobbled too much, he gently steadied it without scolding them. Laughter and small giggles filled the room. Outside, the Emperor observed again. He had come quietly, this time without advisors. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching the simple but important moment. One of the senior ministers whispered, "Your Majesty, it's strange. Such trivial play. Yet the twins are more relaxed than ever." The Emperor nodded silently. He realized that Dylan's presence was changing the twins in ways that no strict discipline or palace procedure ever could. Inside, Dylan continued talking softly to the twins, describing imaginary adventures for the little starships and planets. He made gentle swooshing sounds as each piece flew through the air. The twins were engaged, smiling, and showing initiative. For the first time in many cycles, they were fully themselves. Lyra's giggle was soft but genuine. Kelrin's eyes sparkled as he moved a small block to fit perfectly on top of another. "Good job," Dylan whispered. "See how strong we can be when we work together?" The twins nodded, and a sense of pride shone on their little faces. The Emperor was amazed. No human in his experience had ever so fully understood the importance of small, seemingly trivial moments. He realized that what Dylan was teaching the children was not just fun or play. It was patience, teamwork, confidence, and trust, values that would serve them for a lifetime. As the afternoon continued, Dylan gently encouraged the twins to take small bites of their afternoon snack, a soft fruit paste they had previously refused. He turned it into a game, making airplane noises and pretending the fruit was a little rocket zooming into their mouths. To the astonishment of palace attendants, both twins happily ate without hesitation. The Emperor stepped closer, his expression thoughtful. He finally spoke quietly to Dylan. "Human, your methods are unusual, yet effective. More than that, you are teaching my children lessons we cannot provide. You are showing them warmth, creativity, and confidence." Dylan looked up, slightly embarrassed. "I'm just trying to help them feel safe and happy." "No," the Emperor said. "You are doing more than that. You are showing us, the entire palace, that perhaps we have overlooked the simplest truths, that children need care, patience, and love above all else." Dylan nodded softly, looking back at the twins who were now laughing and building together with pure joy. He realized he had come far from his home, far from his world, and yet this moment, this connection, was what mattered most. The Emperor took a slow breath. He knew that the empire would be stronger if his children grew up confident, happy, and fearless. And somehow, he knew that Dylan, the human father, was an essential part of that process. The final morning of Dylan's first week in the Zogran Palace began quietly. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the nursery, painting the room in soft golden hues. The twins were awake, smiling as they gathered around their little human friend. "Good morning, Dylan," they shouted together, rushing toward him. Dylan laughed, kneeling down to meet them at their level. "Good morning, buddies. Ready for one more breakfast adventure?" The twins nodded eagerly. The familiar ritual had become something they looked forward to every day. As they walked toward the breakfast hall, the Emperor watched from the doorway. He had remained mostly silent all week, learning from Dylan's actions and observing how the twins responded. He had witnessed an extraordinary transformation. The children, once fearful and withdrawn, were now lively, confident, and joyful. In the breakfast hall, Dylan picked up the familiar spoon, holding it like an airplane. He made a soft swooshing noise and guided it gently to the first twin's mouth. "Here comes the airplane," he called softly. The twin opened his mouth, laughing, while the other twin clapped in delight. Within minutes, both were happily eating, chatting, and giggling. The palace attendants, who had initially doubted Dylan's methods, watched in awe. Once breakfast was over, Dylan cleaned the twins gently, then sat back and let them play with their toys. He pulled out crayons and paper, and they drew little pictures together, sharing stories of imaginary adventures. The Emperor stepped forward, breaking his usual reserved posture. He approached Dylan quietly. "Human," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Your presence here has done more than we could have hoped. The twins are thriving. Their spirits are lifted, their confidence renewed. You have brought joy into our palace, something we have not seen in cycles." Dylan looked up, humbled. "I only did what any parent would do. I helped them feel safe and happy." The Emperor smiled softly, a rare expression. "Your ways may be unusual, but they are effective. We have much to learn from you. You have reminded us of the power of care, patience, and understanding." Dylan nodded quietly, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that in this distant empire, far from his own home and world, he had made a meaningful difference. The twins ran to him, hugging his legs, and Dylan laughed warmly. "I'm always here for you," he said. The Emperor watched this simple yet profound moment. He understood now that leadership was not only about rules, order, or power. It was also about compassion, guidance, and nurturing the hearts of the young. In the days that followed, Dylan continued to help the twins. Each day, the palace seemed a little warmer, a little brighter. Laughter filled the halls, and even the most formal attendants began to smile more often. The empire had changed in subtle ways, guided not by force or ceremony, but by the quiet, gentle influence of a human father who knew how to make children feel safe, valued, and loved. And so, the Emperor's twins no longer feared their meals or the weight of expectations. They had discovered joy, trust, and the magic of simple human connection. And Dylan, far from home, had found a purpose that stretched beyond galaxies: to nurture, to guide, and to bring happiness where it was needed most.